Hi, everyone. I'm sharing my screen. This is Juan Bencourt. I'm the CEO of Humantelligence. Thank you for your time today to learn about the state of corporate culture, 11 keys to nurturing a performance-based corporate culture, a survey done by over 500 people who are HR director level or above, like yourselves. And so probably one of the most comprehensive surveys done around culture in the last 24 months. The document that you're seeing here, the cover, Creating Great Corporate Cultures, that will be sent to everybody after the webinar. This webinar is going to be a combination of our thought leadership as a company at Humantelligence, but also highlighting all the key insights from the research project that HR.com so professionally did. Again, it was given to taken by over 500 HR executives from the director level and above. At the end of this, I would hope that all of you have a different way of looking at culture, understanding it, and being able to go back to your organizations to more precisely influence and convince your senior leadership, CEOs, executive leadership team, that you should have budgets to apply to culture specifically. That today many of you from the survey have indicated is not the case, and likely probably because it was very hard to measure before. Not anymore. The future of work and understanding culture is now today. So again, you'll get a 40-page summary report of the insights from this survey. Who is Humantelligence? Humantelligence is the leading cloud-based culture analytics and AI recruiting platform solving the future of work challenges. Using the most advanced patented technology, we are combining both behavioral science and artificial intelligence to improve key talent management areas like recruiting, culture alignment, employee engagement, employee turnover, leadership, performance, talent insights, and onboarding. The agenda. We're going to cover 4 chapters, if you will, of insights for you. 1 is how to approach culture. 2 is measuring culture. 3 is recruiting for culture and best fit. And 4 is a summary of the key takeaways to success on establishing a great culture. So before I go into the next slide, I just want to frame the conversation around culture with how not only did the survey start to help identify how to measure culture and what it is and what it's not, but also what we've been hearing in the marketplace for the last 4 years, where there's real momentum and finally some agreement as to what culture does and does not include. So some of the things that culture does not include, and then I'll go at the end into what it does include. What culture does not include, and again, there's no right or wrong answer. These are findings from the survey and from our own market intelligence, okay? But what we often find and what's becoming more clear is that culture, it's not the mission statement. You need a culture to support your mission statement and to get to that mission and achieve the goals and strategies to support that mission, okay? So you need the right people in the right roles with the right culture to accomplish that mission. So culture should not be mixed with mission. Culture should also not be mixed with benefits. Apple and Microsoft, everyone on this webinar know that they have very different cultures. However, they could both give free Mindful Monday. They could both bring in free consultants on financial planning. They could both give Fridays off or wear jeans on Fridays, casual. That doesn't mean that Microsoft and Apple are trying to achieve the same products or the same mission and that they have to have the same culture. So it's not the mission statement, it's not benefits. It's also not a survey that comes in from McKinsey or another large consulting firm asking all of your executives what they think they are and what they think the culture is. Because culture actually incorporates every person in an organization. Take Uber, for example. If they interviewed the top 20 executives at Uber and found out from those execs what they think the culture is, without talking to or understanding the actual 23,000 people in the organization, you're probably going to have a large gap of reality of culture and what the executives think they are. So it's not a survey at the executive level. Culture also is not a survey of an engagement survey. You could have two companies like Apple and Microsoft take the latest flavor of engagement survey, okay? Whether it's Culture Amp, Perceptics, or the one that SAP just bought, Qualtrics. And you could have the same exact results on 20% super engaged, 50% someone engaged, and 30% I hate my job, I hate my boss, I want to quit. That does not mean that Microsoft and Apple with the same exact results on engagement survey have the same culture. Now, there's also these engagement surveys that are becoming pulse surveys that are being asked every week or every month. Most of you realize and know in HR that culture does not change every week and every month. So the idea that an engagement survey is capturing culture and it changes so quickly is also a misnomer. And the last data point about engagement surveys and why you should not, rely on them as being the right approach to culture is that the key findings and learnings from an engagement survey have never been used in the recruiting process. And if you're not using insights on a culture tool for recruiting for culture fit, clearly there's a reason why you're not doing that. You probably subconsciously don't think that the engagement survey is related to your culture. Those are all things that culture is not. It's not your mission, not your benefits, not a survey of executives, not an engagement survey about if people are happy or not. And lastly, a lot of people confuse culture with leadership. At Uber, they have 3,000 leaders and 23,000 employees. Everyone knows that the Uber CEO was not a very nice person and was eventually fired. And the culture at Uber was described as terrible as long as he was CEO. They fired him, put in a wonderful person as the new CEO who did not have the issues as him. And then all of a sudden, people were saying that the Uber culture is now fixed, that it's great. Well, I think we all know that culture is a lot more complex than moving one leader out from a position. I don't think the culture of the 23,000 people really changed just because you have a new leader at the top. So this whole culture starts from the top and cascades down. The data is now showing that's actually not the case. The culture really is around the majority of the people in an organization and their psychology, how they operate, how they work, and how that all comes together, bottom up. That is going to give you a more accurate picture of your culture. And now with tools that are out there, tools like ours, for instance, but there's other tools like ours, you can actually measure what that is. And so what measuring culture is the psychology of people mixed with the environment of the workplace. So everything from the behaviors, the motivators or values, as well as the work environment in which people work, whether the environment's very structured, like a Six Sigma environment, manufacturing process, or if it's a very creative environment, like an advertising agency or a marketing environment, very different in terms of culture. So our framework, we call it, is it's the BMW of understanding around behaviors, motivators, and work environment. So that's kind of a framing of this conversation around culture and what we'll be talking about and what the survey that was done helped us formulate that conclusion and those really powerful insights for the first time, be able to solidify what culture is for many of you. So we have a poll question. Hester, I'll ask the question and Hester will show the results. What percentage of employees at your company can accurately describe the culture at the company? Go ahead and answer A, B, or C. Less than 25%, between 25 and 50, or over 50%. Someone responded in the chat group, so I think there's a different way of answering or location. Okay, Hester, can they see those results, or am I the only one seeing the results?
They should be able to see the results.
Great, so thanks everybody for your answers. So as you can see, less than 25%, you have as option A, 41% of people think that most employees can accurately describe it. 39% of respondents believe that Up to half of the employees describe it, and only 1 in 5 of you believe that 50% of your employees can describe the corporate culture, and that's consistent with what the survey that was done found. Hester, there are 2 people, or is there somebody on the chat that cannot see the results? So I'm not sure if you can address her directly when I'm still continue. Okay, let's continue. How to approach culture, right? So the survey that was done with 500 of you or more showed that only about 1/3 of HR professionals think that their organization manages culture successfully or very successfully. What's been done wrong in the past is it has been a top-down approach only. And this is a faulty process for creating culture. A lot of people talk about, let's do a culture transformation and take us from point A to point B. The problem is if you don't know where point A is, other than a biased perception at the top, without really incorporating everyone from the bottom into that, then you are going to have issues in measuring culture and knowing where to head. This top-down approach is flawed because it's really the small elite group of executives who are determining an entire culture. Probably 2/3 of you, if not more, have had that executive offsite experience, or some of your exec offsite leaders come back with, the one company, one culture, framework, and everybody in the company is expected to memorize the culture, the 5 values of the company globally. They're expected to put it on their screensavers, have it on the wall. Unfortunately, though, that does not lead to people actually being that culture. But that's the best that has been able to be done until now. You actually have subcultures within different teams and functions, to the second bullet point there. And 78% of HR professionals from the survey do agree that different departments have different cultures. So let me explain. At Coca-Cola, for instance, if you took the behaviors, the motivators, and the work styles, the BMW, if you will, of what can now be measured, the behaviors, the motivators, and work styles of the finance and accounting team, that culture is and should be very different than the culture of the marketing team at Coca-Cola, than the culture of the sales team at Coca-Cola. To say that the marketing people, the sales people, the finance and accounting people should all have the same behaviors, the same communication styles, the same time frame of making decisions, all being very deliberate, or all being very decisive, or all being very stable and not very change oriented, that would actually make a company fail. So the mantra that many companies, even myself prior to this work in the last 5 years, I developed, I was the chief marketing officer and the chief operating officer at Puma, the sports company globally out of Germany. I ran all of Puma other than the CEO, and I transformed the culture. And it's funny looking back, I created the Puma Manifesto, one company, one brand, one culture. Now with data, that actually is laughable, okay? Culture is different even in the same job in different locations. Let's take the example of Starbucks. Starbucks in Florida, where I am based, in Miami, in Little Havana, which many of you have been to probably, is all Latin customers and Latin employees for the most part. And the way that those customers interact with the employees and the way the employees interact with each other, the behaviors, the motivators, and the work styles of what makes that Starbucks a high-performing environment with very high net promoter scores, where those employees are hugging each other, giving each other kisses on the cheek, where they're talking about their personal lives and their family, where they stop and chat and they're very outgoing. And then they do the same with customers, where they're asking them about their children, where they go to school and they spend 20 minutes with a customer, and other customers are now engaged. That experience could be high performance there for the barista role and a team of baristas, but you take that same group of people and put them in New York City, and they would fail miserably because no customer in New York City wants to spend 20 minutes talking to the Starbucks barista about their personal life, about what school their kid goes to, and let alone be touched by the employee. Culture at Starbucks is very different by region of the country, even for the same job or jobs or teams. So this is kind of a good way of understanding that the approach you should take to culture is not just a monolithic, our company culture, but a divisional culture, functional culture, team culture, all the way down to location. And now there's tools to measure that. And if you can get your arms around that complexity, and the only way you can do that is with data, you will be able to achieve the mission of the company and have a competitive advantage against any other company. And you would also be able to improve performance through HR in any line of business of the company, putting the CHRO or the HR function at the seat of the table just as much as the CFO in terms of impacting profitability of a company. So the solution that the survey came up with, that you, the 500 plus who took it, came up with the following examples on how to solve this. You should approach culture with the smallest microgroup first and work your way up. You should focus on finding and sharing foundational values. In that BMW methodology or framework, the behaviors, okay, and the motivators, or let's call them values, and the work styles, the one of the three parts of that BMW methodology are the motivators or the values. Maybe those would be your foundational across the entire company values, okay, and we call them motivators, other people call them values, okay, and then the behaviors and the work styles probably would be very different across your organization depending on that first bullet point micro group. You should also allow groups to maintain their uniqueness when it comes to their behaviors, their communication styles, their work styles, depending on what function they're in, what region of the world they're in. For many of you who've worked in France and worked in China, okay, you could probably remember how different it was at the same company that the headquarters was in the US, how different it was to work there, okay? Same mission, just very different cultures in those parts of the world. So the survey statement that was given in the survey around the approach to culture is, what extent do you agree with the following statements about your organization? And so 78% of respondents thought that different departments, for example, finance, marketing, et cetera, have different cultures. 75% agree that different work teams have different cultures. So yes, every team leader has a different culture in his or her team. And 42% of you were surveyed thought that the culture of the executive team is the culture throughout their organization. But I think you're starting to realize that maybe that number might be more inflated in reality than the survey tends to agree. 13% strongly think that, and 29% softly agree to that. Another poll question: can you clearly define the current culture of your sales department? Go ahead and take a minute to respond to that, yes or no. So as you can see, that 43% of you on this webinar can define the current culture of your sales department versus a global culture of the company, and 57% of you say you cannot. That is the opportunity that is staring all of us in the human resources realm or world. It's the not being able to define the current culture of a group in your company is the opportunity and probably the inefficiency that's leading to turnover in that specific department or function. Okay, so now measuring your culture. Only 50% of HR professionals in the survey can describe their culture of other teams and other departments as well. Meaning most of you don't realize or haven't had the exposure to or the measurement of these subculture groups. But the problem is, if we don't understand the different cultures within the company, how can we measure or optimize them properly? If you can't measure it, how do you optimize it? And so this is a mantra that most companies know that if they're not able to measure something accurately, they cannot improve it. And when it comes to culture, if you can't measure it, you can't establish it, you can't define it. Everybody on this call works at a company that either has product roadmaps, technology roadmaps, service roadmaps, some form of roadmap affecting the division or the function you're in. How many of you actually have a culture roadmap where you know where you are today and where you want to go, not only as an organization, but in the finance group, in the marketing group, in the line of business X or in the line of business Y, in the manufacturing site that has more shrinkage than the other, or more defects than the other manufacturing sites, okay? If you cannot measure your culture, you cannot have a culture of intention, and you will end up having a culture by default. Current techniques for measuring culture that fail or have minimal impact are some of the ones I alluded to in the very beginning. Climate surveys and knowing if people are happy or sad, those are nice and you should do them, but don't think that that's your culture. That's a different situation and a different insight. It's kind of like for those who have children, if you've ever had a 6-year-old child on a climate survey, imagine giving your child at 6 a.m. before waking up, as you wake them up to brush their teeth and go to school, to elementary school, kindergarten, and you say, hey, little Charlie or little Diana, I want to do a climate survey. Is this a great family to be part of? Am I a great mother or father? Are we a great family to be part of? And is it fun? And that little kid, 6 years of age, so Monday, just had a great weekend, they're probably going to give very low scores. And then on Saturday, you wake them up at 6 a.m. and tell them that you're going to go to Disney World. And you do a climate survey then. I bet you your family ratings and the culture response is really positive, and all the kids are going to say they love this family. They'd recommend this family to a friend. They're not going to leave this family. And as you can see, the culture of your child, that 6-year-old child, the behaviors, the motivators, and the work styles of that child, or let's call it play styles, that really hasn't changed from Monday to Saturday, but the results of a climate survey are all over the map. And you can spend your whole next week trying to address the climate survey of your 6-year-old between Monday and Saturday. But the reality is, if there is an issue with the behaviors, the values, and the work styles of your child, knowing the climate of how they're happy or sad one day to the next isn't really going to give you the data to really improve on that culture. In addition, the second bullet point, the poll surveys. A lot of work, the engagement surveys, a lot of work, but I've still never heard anybody explain to me how 1,000 employees giving information up to management, how that actually improves the engagement between two people. It's great knowledge for the company, but how does Mary and Tom sitting 2 chairs away from each other when they do an engagement survey, how does that improve their own engagement as they work day to day in their current workflows? The other kind of techniques that survey participants acknowledged did not have much impact on culture were just understanding turnover rates and employee assistance programs and benefits. All of these things people are realizing are important for companies to address, important to measure, important to do, but that they're getting confused and mingled into culture, which is kind of a separate thing that's really driving the foundation of an organization. The survey also showed that surveys don't tell the full story behind company culture. So engagement surveys are used by about 50% of the organizations, not only surveyed in this HR.com survey, but in most surveys that are done. And that these engagement surveys are used to attempt to measure culture. And as the bullet points show, it's not about memorizing what you think the culture is and having your employees regurgitate back to you in that attempted engagement survey. Those engagement surveys don't show the difference between perceived culture and actual culture. Those engagement surveys don't explore factors like the behavior, the personality, the work habits, which are actually the true foundation of a company's culture. And those engagement surveys and poll surveys don't change. The culture actually doesn't change week to week or month to month. And they've never been really used in terms of hiring for culture fit. Interestingly, if you were to ask every team leader in your company, we have our overarching culture, we've all measured it, and then you go and ask your team leaders, what would you define your team culture as? What are the two behaviors, the two motivators, or some call that values, and the two work styles of your specific team, Bob or Mary or Jose or Josefina? What is the culture of your team? The reality is they'd look at you like you have two heads and say, well, I've memorized the culture of the company booklet you handed out, and I got 90% on being able to articulate them on the last engagement survey. But the problem is, if they cannot articulate their own team culture, then how are they hiring for culture fit into their team? How are they either replicating the people that they have that they want to reproduce or clone, or more importantly, how are they hiring for diversity of thought? Not just diversity in terms of race, religion, ethnicity, but diversity of thought, diversity of behaviors, diversity of how to work. If you're on a creative team or you're in a cross-functional team, R&D, engineering, at a consulting firm, okay, or a batch process at a manufacturing plant where you need different perspectives and different strengths. If a team leader has no idea about their own team culture, they cannot either clone what they have or hire for diversity of thought. And this is a real issue. The survey question that was done in the survey most of you took is does your organization actively measure the following? And this is what percent said yes. 28% of you said that your companies measure the overall corporate culture. 23% of you said that you measure the specific team or department within the organization, and only 16% of you said that there were differences between the overall corporate and specific team culture. And so if most companies aren't measuring those differences, it seems that the survey supports that many people and many HR organizations and just general organizations really don't have that difference between the company and microcultures by department, by division, by function, by region, by line of business. It's not very clear. And so that's a pretty low number. And again, the opportunity for you to go back to your organizations, okay, and share with them the results of this survey and say, hey, this is a new frontier. We can now apply data and measurement to something that was soft before. And it's not just the engagement survey. We can actually now measure the different cultures from the top down to the bottom of the organization. Now we're going to talk about how to do it more accurately with data. So you'd want to choose tools that are scientifically based. So there are many assessment tools out there. Unfortunately, many of those tools are just what they say they are. They are behavioral science self-assessment. Well, behavioral science indicates the first bullet point, which is just behaviors. Unfortunately, behaviors is not all of culture. It's just one aspect. So you want to make sure that when you're evaluating assessment tools, that it's not just measuring behaviors, such as predictive index, strength finders, Gallup, DISC. Those are principally just measuring behaviors. It's a good start. But to understand the full culture of your organization, of a division, of a team, of why certain people or groups or teams perform and why others don't, you also need to measure things like motivators. And there you have well-known tools that have been around a while. I think SHL has a few like that. Hogan has a tool that measures motivators. Lominger gets there. The challenge with those tools today in the marketplace, they're very expensive. They come with a consultant. They come with a workshop. They come with thousands of dollars of expense. So typically it's only for your leaders. And again, if you're only measuring the motivators or values for your leadership, that's the culture of your leadership, but it still leaves to be desired. How do you measure the values or motivators for your entire 10,000 person company or 2,000 person company or even 500 person company? So make sure that you're also getting to the values or motivators, that second bullet point. Thirdly, try to find scientific tools that measure the work environment which gives somebody energy. You can ask somebody all day long if they're happy or sad, but why don't you do instead the more powerful thing, which is to understand at the psychological level what gives someone energy. Is it a structured environment with proven methods? working with data and facts, or is it a creative environment with minimal routine and complete creativity and flexibility and variety every day? The same person with the same DISC results, the same predictive index, or the same Hogan, if you don't know the third part, could be miserable in one company or team, but happy in another. And so it's that trifecta of BMW, of behaviors, motivators, and you can switch the motivators with the word values, and work that are truly going to drive the culture of your company, explain why you're either achieving your mission or not achieving your mission in the company, in the divisions, in the functions, all the way down to the team level. There's also the term self-assessment. A lot of the behavioral tools out there are asking people to pick from a list. If you take DISC or you take Crystal, that's also on LinkedIn, you will see that it asks to pick, of these 10 characteristics, what do you think you are most or least? You need to be careful with that, because that self-assessment is not scientifically based. That self-assessment is what someone thinks of themselves. So you might not be getting to the true answer of what explains that person and or a group of people. And Hester, there's a lot of chat questions and things coming up. I'm assuming you're taking all those on the side, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Recruiting for culture fit. So now that you've measured the culture, not only of the company, but of every team, group, division, function, territory, office, whether it's dental office in McAllen, Texas, or a dental office in Dallas, and the different cultures of those offices. Once you have measured it, the behaviors, the values, or what we call motivators, and the work styles, you can now recruit for culture fit or for best fit. As you can see, I don't say hire for fit. We've all, for the last 50 years, have become experts in hiring for fit. You don't need our software or any assessment tool to hire for fit. Hiring for fit means you have 5 final candidates. And let's say Janet is the one everybody on the team likes after that Friday of interviews, and Mark is the one that everybody likes least. Okay, they all 5 can do the job. Their resume is great. They all work, so many years. They've done that job. The reality, though, is it's not about just hiring who you like. Sometimes, and this is not happening today, people should be hiring, let's say, Bob, the one that they like least of those 5, not that they hated them or did something wrong in the interview, but just they like Janet more, but maybe they should hire Bob, even though they like Janet more, because Bob is a better fit for the culture of the role, the behaviors needed, the motivators needed, and the work styles needed for that role, or for the culture fit of the team. Let's say they don't want everyone to be the same. So maybe having someone who's more diverse is a better answer for that marketing team. And so that's a big problem that companies have, is that they're hiring who they like, and leaders have a difficulty of hiring for a role or for a culture of intention versus for the person they'd like to go and have lunch with or beer after work with, or just to get along with better. The results of the survey showed that 69% of you who took the survey admit that their organization sometimes hires likable candidates who turn out to be a poor fit. So basically 7 in 10 of you acknowledge what we also find in the marketplace, which is basically hiring who you like is often not the right solution. It often ends with the following scenario. Let's say we all liked Janet the most and did not hire Bob because you did not use a tool from the future of work, like our own or others. And 3 months later, you're going to fire Janet because she's just not performing. You call Janet in the room. You say, hey, Janet, close the door. Hey, Janet, I think you're great. I'm your manager. The team really loves you. We loved you since we interviewed you. But you know what? You're just not working out. We're going to have to let you go. This is, I believe, and I've asked over 2,000 people myself in my journeys around the country, this is what 99% of companies have experienced and hiring managers, and it's all around this problem that people hire who they like, and they don't have tools up until now that will identify who to hire for the right fit and the best fit versus who they like the most. So steps to avoid this kind of bias and to hire for culture fit or best fit, you should first measure the current culture with validated behavioral assessments, not the self-reporting ones, but validated ones. You should all ask for the technical validation from the company that's trying to sell you the vendor that's selling you the assessment. Create a best fit for the role from team results. So use what already works. Use the measurement of your existing group of employees in a manufacturing plant, on a team, in a store, at headquarters, in that consulting environment, okay? And use data to either clone the existing traits you like or to complement that with diversity of thought. Now with data, you can guarantee diversity, true diversity of thought, whether it is 5 Asians or 5 Anglos or 5 Hispanics, or maybe it is one of each of those. Don't let the color of skin and what's aesthetically defined as diversity truly be your highest level of diversity. Really, the psychology and working styles is the way you get to optimal diversity. Most organizations hire for team fit, okay, but emotions may cloud that definition of best fit. So you should also direct recruiting efforts around meeting that best fit match, and you should leverage technology and the data-driven AI to filter candidates, not these subjective phone screens where people just at the beginning of the funnel are hiring people who they like in the phone screen process. Practical application. What does a culture actually look like? How can we prove that talent analytics actually work? Let's see what culture fit and talent analytics look like in a practical setting. So here are some screenshots from tools out there. We'd be happy to tell you where these tools are. Just reach out to us after the webinar. But this is an example of culture analytics for a team. Here are the values, or what we call motivators, for one team. In this case, at the top, this team has some dominant motivators that are service-oriented, and some that are innovative. And if you look, the leader in this case, and we replace the pictures with our own pictures for GDPR constraints and privacy reasons. So we've gotten everyone to agree to use these pictures. My picture is the one there under helping under the number 9, and freedom under the M under the number 18. Those are my 2 dominant motivators. I'm helping and I'm freedom oriented. Well, if you noticed, I hired everybody on this team, for example, just like myself, and that was not by intention. This is an example of, without a tool like this, this is what often happens. And now you can see where your team is balanced, where everyone's like the manager or not, where you have an opening to be practical. So a team culture like this would be too knowledge-based on the left and not practical enough. That's there in the middle. And so they probably don't execute and move on after meetings and get things done. You can also look at work styles of a team. So again, an example that we changed the pictures to people from our company and who agreed to use their pictures here. The culture of this team is very creative, and sure enough, this is from a mapping of a startup from 3 years ago. And that team environment was creative. They like new solutions. They are very like variety and working styles, and they're very flexible with minimal structure controls. That is the great culture for, let's say, a startup. But once that startup enters a new phase of maybe scaling and growing, they need to become more systematic on the left side of that culture mapping. So you can see here that you can look at a team culture and see where there's too many people who are the same, not diverse, if it's supporting the mission or the goal of that team. In this case, the startup was not able to scale because it was not systematic enough. And you can provide performance insights as well on who performs and who doesn't. And in that sense, let's look at a sales division. You can then roll the data up and see for 200 people, what is the culture of an entire division, bottom up with data, not through surveys of the top executives. So in this case, this team has the motivators or values of being very freedom and very unique and very knowledge oriented, 41%, 23%, and 14% respectively. So this team, or this whole organization, values creativity or following established procedures, and they like to bring new ideas and adapt to change. They like challenging conventional thinking. So is that the right culture for a manufacturing plant? Probably not. Probably have the wrong team. That could be explaining why they're having performance issues. Is it the right culture for a creative sales team? Maybe it is. This gives you the information to show you why you have performance or not. You can leverage talent analytics as well to see for specific roles, not just groups, comparing what explains performance for high performers in sales, for instance, or low performers. So let's say this is Merck Pharmaceuticals. They could pull out all their high performers. Point one, identify the insights on what aspects of motivators or values, of behaviors, of work styles lead to high performance, which are different from low performers. So in this case, there are 3 things that explain high performance of 12 in this example or model, and 3 things that don't lead to performance. So now you can do 3 things. You can develop the low performers to perform like high performers at your organization without firing the low performers. You can move people internally for career mobility, okay, and find the right home for them. Again, not firing them and losing all the training and investment you put in them. And then thirdly, you can use this data in the AI for recruiting and leverage AI to hire based not on interviews at the beginning to filter to your final candidates, but on data that lets you know that you're hiring a potentially predictive high performer, and then interview the final 5, the most objective, diverse candidates using platforms like this and data, and then let the subjectivity of interviews creep in once you've got the most objective final 5. You can look at the top stores of a region and compare their cultures with the bottom stores, pulling out how you would then build out more stores in that region. You can look out for M&A, mergers and acquisitions. 70% of all M&As fail, they say. Why? Because of the culture integration. Now you can have that information not only before you make the acquisition, but after the acquisition, in the post-acquisition integration. You would not only have a roadmap to integrate the products, the services, the functional areas, but also the culture and of any groups, division, or territories that are not aligned culturally. Tools like this can also allow you to map what you've already defined as your core values to the platforms that exist that for the most part can capture all of your existing core values to a predetermined set of 28 variables that you can then go and measure. So it's taking this soft, amorphous, kind of high level, by company cultures X, putting it into a software that actually then can measure for every employee, every team, every group, where you are and how close or similar you are to what you think you are. Some case studies that have leveraged culture analytics like this, to give you an idea, we've gone from the survey results conceptually to some kind of software platforms that can help, and some of the screenshots of what that looks like. Now I'm going to show you how actual data was used to save companies millions of dollars, and you guys can do this too today. Okay, and so if you're noticing, these case studies are going to show you that these are HR tools around talent analytics and data analytics that are business performance tools that will improve the ROI and profitability of your organizations. So there is the largest furniture company in the world identified that the people who were high performers with data had a culture of being helping. And the low performers had more of a dominant culture of wanting to make money. And they had always been hiring people who were motivated by high bonuses and performance metrics, pay for performance. They were hiring wrong. And they didn't realize that until they got data to show that it was more important for their batch manufacturing process to have helping and belonging people, not belonging and people interested in money. They also found in those high performers that their behaviors, they were more deliberate, they were more steady, they took their time in the process in the manufacturing plant. And by the way, this is over 20,000 people in this manufacturing plant, and they had 100% turnover, okay? And this data helped reduce the turnover by 40%. The low performers were much more extreme, decisive, okay, and not deliberate, okay? This is all the data analysis that showed which groups fell into which areas, and even showed that the people that they were not hiring, that literally 30% of the people that they interviewed and weren't hiring would actually have been in that green area above 71% fit with high performers. And so you can start to understand that data is a much better element or filter for hiring than subjectivity of hiring managers, that we all know what happens when you do that, which leads to higher turnover. Again, this is the data showing the fit of high performers and low performers. Okay, another example is a trucking company learned that truck drivers were spending more money per truck driver, actually $5,000 on gas, even though they drive the same routes and price adjusting for location in the country. It turns out that the very decisive truck drivers were flooring the gas at red light and on passing on the highway, which led to this $5,000 a year expense across 3,000 or 2,000 truckers, which led to about $10 million in savings when they implemented this. The drivers who were outgoing, extreme outgoing from the data, so truck drivers with a culture of being extremely outgoing, they also were always late and they chatted too much. And so they were losing net promoter scores and losing customers based on that. So as you can see, data can explain a lot of the performance of everything from manufacturing to truck drivers to product innovation like Honda Motors has experienced. So I'm going to stop there and just go over the last chapter of this before we open up to questions. The 11 key takeaways that the survey found from you, not me, but from you on establishing a culture of intention were the following, okay? Make culture a strategic priority, which many of you do already. Don't assume that there's only one culture. Now that's a new point for you to take away from this webinar. Measure and assess thoughtfully and often your culture by area, by group, and define a culture roadmap. Once you know where you actually are after you measure it, define the roadmap and where you are in that journey, not only at the executive level for the company, but at every division, every functional area, whether it's sales, marketing, customer service, R&D, and for every region of the world or product line that you have or service line. Okay, learn about your company's subcultures. Look at the culture, team by team, group by group, function by function. Don't assume you have the same culture everywhere. That will lead to failure and you will not have a competitive advantage. You need to have these microcultures identified so not only you can achieve the mission and the objectives for every subgroup in your matrix organization, but also so you can optimize that and hire better for it. Second bullet point, clarify and communicate the key aspects of your culture consistently, okay? Third bullet point, be prepared for change and potential turnover of those that no longer align to your culture. Macroeconomic environments and business model changes will necessitate a different culture. 6 years ago when I started Humantelligence, what led to our success was a very change-oriented creative culture. We would have never scaled to the organization we are today with over 30 employees if we had stuck with that culture and not moved to a more stable and structured environment to scale the business and manage all the customers we have. So every team leader, every group, every function, every division should think, how will my company or my group, my team's culture change given the roadmap of my strategic plan, objectives, and strategies over the next 3 years, and create a roadmap for your culture. And provide through training to your managers on this cultural alignment. The last few key takeaways: adopt a recognition program to reinforce values, embed culture in the hiring process. Think about those engagement surveys. Is there anything that you can take out of it for hiring? If those engagement surveys actually had any impact on culture, they should elicit some ideas to hire better. Last bullet point, empower employees to protect their culture. Okay, specialty groups like Latinas or in technology, et cetera, LGBTQ. So empower employees to also contribute and protect their own cultures within the organization. So think about the one thing that you can do after learning today's webinar to build a stronger culture at your organization. Emotional intelligence and basically EQ is what we've been talking about all day today. The future of work, okay, is about infusing and understanding emotional intelligence so everyone in your organization can work better together. Every leader becomes a better leader, okay? Every two people become better engaged. That's what makes a difference. So know your team, culture, make hiring decisions that are based on data, not on who you like, and reduce turnover, improve results as a result. Let's open it up to questions now. Thank you. Esther?
Oh, sorry, I thought you were going to do the Q&A.
Oh, no, I can do it. Is it just clicking on this button that says Q&A and then just read them there? Okay. So we have one question here. The culture will be more geared to the type of personality of the manager in each department. No, based on how each manager inspires their team. No. So that's a great question. And by the way, Hester, can they also read what I'm reading, or they're only hearing me?
They can only hear you.
Okay.
They can't see them.
So got it. So the question's around, isn't the culture based on the leader? Well, sometimes and sometimes not. And you don't know until you actually measure through all of them. Some leaders think, I'm a strategy consultant and I need a team of analysts. Well, you better hope that those analysts under the strategy leader at that consulting firm have nothing to do with the culture of the leader, or that leader is never going to get the results that he or she needs. So you cannot assume that the team culture is going to reflect the leader. If the leader only hires people like themselves, and that's a good conclusion, but the best leaders don't always just hire themselves. So you can't make an assumption and presume. Another question, how do you differentiate culture from climate? So we differentiate it, and what the survey results and what we're finding in the market is the psychology of a person, a group of people, values and behaviors is separated from work environment. What environment does someone feel engaged, right? Whether it's a structured or a creative environment. Now, in Coca-Cola, 30,000 people, if there's a manager with 10 employees who's a real jerk and a horrible culture in that team because of that manager, it doesn't mean that the whole company culture is terrible. For the 10 employees, it might feel that way, but it's really the culture of that team that's terrible because of that manager. So climate does come in at that level. Another question, HR and line management can have different concepts of corporate culture from the people responsible for negotiating and administering collective labor agreements within the same organization. Can you spell conflict? Yeah, what you are going to find is what the executives and HR want the culture to be, the intentional culture, and what the employees are experiencing, especially in a union or collective labor environment. Those could be different. And so you have to work together to align on the roadmap, and then use tools like this so that it's no longer a perspective, but a common aligned objective that everyone knows is best for not only the company, but the employees. Another question we have here. If you know how people respond to the survey, it must not be anonymous. How has this gone over in the organization? Have you used a tool? Great question. Most of the people taking the survey or the questionnaire that we have found, they don't know that this data is going to be rolled up to identify the psychology of the organization. So most people don't have the fear of, am I going to fit with the culture or not? It's really empowering individuals to be self-aware. These are tools that often are only given to the executives. So it's something that you position when you give these to your employees, that it's a benefit, that you're the company that is investing in these employees for self-development, for self-awareness, for everyone to get along better. So it only benefits them. Now, on the other side of that, the data is given to the organization, and the organization, certain people in talent analytics or in HR, will be able to conclude what the culture is. But in terms of individuals, other than being on a team and seeing how they can use this information to work better, it doesn't have that negative implication that's being referred to in this question. But it's a great question. We get that a lot. So changing culture through hiring and hiring for culture fit. So one of the things that you should distinguish, and it's a great question, you should actually look to hire for best culture fit. Now you need to define what that culture fit is. Is it aligning everyone to be the same, or is it making sure you have diversity? Once you measure culture team by team, group by group, it's the first time you can actually manage to hiring for diversity. If you're not measuring teams and groups, it is always going to be a subjective process, and it will guarantee that everyone is like the same person. In terms of the size of a team that it takes to measure, what we have found is obviously more people, more data, more accurate the culture. But we've gotten the most results starting at about 9 people to 10 people on a team. The platforms like ours and other tools out there can start to see trends on the vector of psychology that really will drive behaviors of a team, drive motivators or values, and drive work styles. So look at the number 10 as where you can start to rely on information. We've had as small as 5 and 6 people show alignment in culture. Last 2 questions, or I think 3 here. I think it's just a point. This person highlights that culture is very different in different national countries with different locations and different governments with different organizations, and tools like ours. And what we found is, yes, the data supports how different those are, and you should have a tool that can pick up those nuances by country. There's a question around recognitions and awards. That's not something our company is an expert in, so I'll couch that. I don't have the information or knowledge to speak to that question. But that's part of implementing post the measurement, and it's a great question. For the M&A question around how do you get the data of the other company before you acquire them, it's a great question. You really can't unless it's a publicly known acquisition. But what you can do, this tool or tools like this isn't to say don't acquire them, because at the end of the day, if there's a great business reason to go to market together, you're still going to have that business reason. What this tool will do will allow you, once the acquisition happens, to best make that integration as successful as possible post-acquisition. What's the first step to identify a company's culture? Go find an assessment tool that's not self-reporting, that's not just behaviors, that's not just values, but that covers behaviors, motivators, and work styles, and at a price point, okay, where you're not spending millions of dollars to get the data and insights for your entire company. That's the first step. There's a question around subcultures and getting managers to understand those. Once everyone understands their own subculture and the roadmap for their team or their group or division, how do they work together? It's the same process on how they work together when it comes to goals, strategies, and objectives in a matrix organization that roll up. I was a Procter & Gamble executive for about 5 years. You know, we go through the OGSM, the Objective Goal Strategy Measures training or process every year in our long-term strategic planning, 1, 3, 5 years, and would cascade down. We'd all have to work together on developing this bottom up and top down. Culture should just be added to that as well. Last question, how do you explain to hiring managers the difference between likeness bias and vetting for culture fit? That is a great question. There is going to be an education process. You know, where you're going to have to share and show leadership managers, hiring managers, that it's not just about liking someone, that it's about performance. And so, but when you have data, you'll be able to show your top 5 stores and your bottom 5 stores that maybe the top 5 stores who are more diverse, because the data proves it, you can now go to the bottom 5 stores and show them, hey, you're bottom 5 every year, and your employees in each of your stores are not diverse. They only are all the same behavior, same motivators, same work styles, and look at the data that shows what performance looks like. So once you have this data, you will no longer get from the business side the pushback that, oh, you're HR, you don't know what I need. You'll be able to show them what performance looks like culturally for their team, for other teams like theirs, for great managers. And it's also great to then use for leadership training and development, and identifying future high potentials and then developing them for those future leadership roles. Those are all the questions that I have here in the Q&A. Hester, I think we're now over by 2 minutes. I'm happy to stay on for more questions. I'm not sure, what do we do now, Hester?
Now we'll need to finish up because our hour is up. So
great. Well, thanks everyone. Again, you can reach out to me at juan@humantelligence.com. or go to our website, humantelligence.com, and we'd be happy to answer any more questions that you have about this space, culture, about recruiting for culture fit, or best culture fit that you are looking to have a culture of intention. And good luck with everything, and have a great fall. Bye.
I'd like to thank our presenter as well as all of you for joining us today. If you'd like to view this webcast again, the archive recording will be available on the hr.com website tomorrow, and the webcast credit will show in your hr.com account within 2 business days. We'll also send you an email with your credit information. Your feedback is important to us. Please take a moment to fill out the exit survey that opened in a new browser page on your computer. This concludes our webcast. Enjoy the rest of your day.